Hello fellow artists, welcome to the first episode of Animation Station. In episodes like these, I'll be animating and talking about animation. I apologize for the lack of clarity at the beginning of the video. I will change around the opacities later, around the 4-minute mark, so that it's clearer to see what I'm doing. This episode in particular is about how I created one of my channel intros. I plan for this channel to be a diverse channel with 5 types of distinct videos. Animation related videos like this one, comic related videos under the title Comic Corner, casual draw with me types of videos, story time videos, and finally animatics and animations. Each type of video will be represented by unique, characterized versions of myself. If you look at my YouTube banner, you will see the 4 characters I've created. The character that I'm drawing now is the representative for the Animation Station and animatic videos. I designed her randomly in art class when my teacher said to draw how we were feeling that day, which sounds really cheesy now that I think about it. So, I drew this anxious little bean on one of my first days of college art class, and I've used her in a couple of animations on this channel already. I represented my anxiety that day with eye bags, so that's why this character always has bags under her eyes. I designed all the characters already, and their animations will be revealed with each of their types of videos. I was originally planning to have all 4 animations focused on in this video, but I felt the video would be way too long. As you can see, while I'm drawing these keyframes, I already finished some animation aspects, including my channel logo and the swirly portal the character is trying to crawl out of. The other 3 animations will use the same base. The idea for this intro was for a character to be smushed by my logo, similarly to the cute Cartoon Network in-card animations. I'm new to animation, so this was an exciting thing to do and learn from. I made the base for the animation rather quickly, treating it as a thumbnail sketch to get my ideas down. In this animation, the character opens the logo, falls off balance for a second, then centers herself, and eventually gets smushed by the logo. Now, I'm drawing the keyframes for the animation. With keyframes, I try to keep 2 ideas in mind, silhouette and appeal. Appeal is a principle of animation that is kind of hard to explain, but it basically means, does it look good? It deals with character design, composition, and all other things that give art appeal. I try to make sure that every pose I made into a keyframe was clear and appealing in expression and intent. This includes making sure the silhouette of the character is clear, meaning that if you fill the character in with black, you're still able to tell what they are doing. I think this is very important with keyframes because these are the poses that are supposed to remain in the viewer's mind most predominantly, so they must be clear. In-betweens are where you can tend to be more subtle and have more overlapping and confusing shapes. I actually prefer in-betweening to keyframes because you can really see the animation coming together once you start in-betweening. This is the part of the video where I got the clarity under control and changed up the opacity so it's easier to see what I'm doing. Before I started in-betweening, I color picked from my character's character sheets, which I made before animating. I'm really happy with how her colors came out, and I personally think they are really appealing to look at, which is all I could ask for in a character. Harmony, which is the program I'm using to animate, has a very interesting color system. If you want to change one color for the whole animation because you think it's off, instead of paint bucketing every single frame the color shows up in, you can simply go to the color in your color palette and change it, and it changes it for the whole thing immediately. For my palettes, I always make sure to have a shaded version of the base color. So you might have noticed in the keyframe stage that I was drawing the character's torso, head, and legs first, then adding the arms, clothes, hair, and glasses later on, and using different colors for them all. Each item is on a different layer. They don't need to be, but that's just how I work. When I'm animating, it's best to move the torso and head separate from the legs and arms because those parts of the body are usually what move first on a person. Arms, legs, clothes, and accessory fall under items that experience drag, a principle of animation, meaning these things will have delayed movement when compared to the head and torso. It's easiest to draw them on separate layers so that you can more easily move them individually. Hair and stuff like long wispy scarves are things that experience drag the most, so I try to make those items the most delayed. Think of the concept of drag in relation to a tree. Movement would start at the trunk and move into the branches, then the twigs, then the leaves. And so the leaves would be the last to stop moving. With people, it's fingers and toes and hair. Natural movement often tends to happen in arches. Arching is another animation principle, which I find very important because it prevents your animations from looking stiff and robotic. An example of an unarched movement in this animation is the animation of the logo opening and slamming shut. It moves on a straight line and thus is very robotic and stiff. The character animation is livelier than the logo animation because it is animated more naturally with the use of arches. I often just draw an arch line from one keyframe position to the next and follow that arch. Arches can be used on nearly any human body movement, such as a head rolling or even someone winding up to jump. It's kind of hard to remember this principle at times when I'm drawing, but it's important to try to keep in mind when moving something organic. If you notice a movement is kind of stiff, remember your arches. Animation is really fascinating in the way that you can draw the same movement many different ways. I was kind of overwhelmed by walk cycles when I first learned about them in art class, because I was hit with the realization that, oh my gosh, I could draw a person walking sadly, happily, calmly, angrily, silly, with a limp, anything. And it made me contemplate a question: how will I become good enough at this to get an industry job if animation is so infinite? I'm still overwhelmed by it, but animating is getting easier as I do it more and more every day. For the first time in a while, I feel like I might have some talent or potential. For a long time, I've always just admired animation from afar. I watched all the Disney movies in theaters and got angry when they stopped doing 2D movies, then dove headfirst into 2D animated shows on channels like Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and Disney Channel. It was not until very recently that I had decided to animate seriously, or at all for that matter. I started taking art itself seriously after watching the movie Big Hero 6, which came out 7 years ago in 2014. I was mesmerized by the world building and art. It was the first time I wanted to walk into an art piece and live there. Right after the movie, I couldn't help thinking, wow, someone had made that. Someone had made all of the artwork with their own hands. But I was very discouraged from animating myself because I kept hearing everyone saying how hard animation was. How it's impossible, it's frustrating, it's hell. You have to draw way too many drawings. I didn't think I'd have the patience, so I didn't want to outright pursue animation. Instead, I wanted to go into comics. But senior year of high school, when applying to colleges, I changed my mind and decided to pursue 2D animation. I changed my mind because I had been watching Steven Universe regularly, and it sparked so much emotion within me that I finally said to myself, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make a show. And I felt the best route to doing that was going to school for animation. I still plan to take lots of comic classes as well, so I like to think of that as my backup career choice. I feel I prefer animation to comic making though, because I've never finished a comic project before, but I've finished multiple animation projects. Okay, I'm gonna steer this back around to what I'm working on currently in the recording. When in-betweening expressions, I just try to make sure the expression doesn't spread across the face so fast. So I try and add 2 or 3 in-betweens, and it usually turns out okay. I paid tribute to the Muppets with this character because I've been told this character is creepy. So I've decided to lean into that by giving her a Muppet smile, because I find the Muppet smile creepy yet endearing. I wanted to also make her skin look wrinkled and flabby, but I need to practice this a bit more because it's not exactly how I hoped it would look. The character is waving to the audience, so I needed to pay close attention to the way her sleeve dragged. This was the part of the in-between process that I corrected the most. I wanted to try to capture the movement of her sleeve circling her wrists, along with her forwards and backwards hand movement. Circular stuff like sleeves and bracelets tend to behave as hula hoops would when movement is swaying from side to side. I redrew the sleeves about 10 times. It was very frustrating, but in the end, I feel I got around what I wanted. The arm also waves in an arch motion. Other than the sleeve, the drag of the clothing wasn't too difficult. I simply had to delay the coat a bit and settle it into its position. I had to go back into my keyframes and adjust the length of the coat as well to make sure the character was more consistent. Consistency is one of the hardest things for me to do in animation. I hope to try to improve this soon. My goals with animation overall are to try to make it as polished and professional as possible, but I don't want to copy any one industry style. But for a portfolio, you will need to show that you can draw in the style they want you to draw in. But till then, I hope to be more individual. Adjustments to the feet had to be made to make sure that the character was always inside of the logo and to smooth out the movement from position to position. The drag of the scarf was fun to do. I just love the accessory of scarves a lot. The story behind the character's outfit is that I was just wearing it the day my teacher asked us to draw how we felt, and now that's just what she wears too. I've always loved winter wear, and since my school is in Minnesota, I have lots of chances to wear winter clothing. Some of my favorite in-betweens to do are the ones that are very similar to the one before it, because they are easier, but also because they really smooth out the animation. When scrunching up the scarf, I made sure to make the scarf push upwards, because when something has pressure coming in on both sides, it moves upwards. A good way to check this fact is by pushing your fingers together gently, and you should notice that they begin to push up into a pyramid shape. This is also how mountains are formed. Maybe I get a bit too sciencey with animation, but I think a basic understanding of how the world works and force itself is very important. However, I feel it's more important to study the principles of animation and to always keep them in the back of your head when animating, because following those is also like following the basic principles of force and gravity. The drag of the hair is where I feel I must keep improving the way I animate drag. Drag changes from object to object. Thinner hair tends to drag more, while thicker hair stays in place more and is stiffer. Since I am African American, my hair is thick, yet when I animate this character, I feel I make the hair move way too much. I have to keep making sure I delay the hair long enough so that the hair doesn't get there before the head, because that's a mistake I often make. This is where I also feel that I get very overwhelmed with the infiniteness of animation. Even just different hair textures could create a completely different animation feeling and process. Now I'm making my way towards the end of the in-betweening process, which means the rough pass of the animation is nearly complete. With animation, there is a layer of work I often see people do. Start off with the original idea, which in my case was the base animation sketch. Then I move on to the keyframes, then the in-betweens, which are both part of the rough animation process, then some fix up the rough animation, but in my case, I just go on to the line art. Then from the line art, I'll move on to color and finally compile the footage into After Effects, adding the lighting and shading. Now I'm getting into the line art. I lined one of the first frames where the whole character was showing and then colored it to test how the colors looked in the program. What I noticed when turning the Harmony file into an MP4 is that the colors are always off, so I usually export a PNG image from Harmony to be sure the colors aren't too faded. The first part of the line art was more stressful because I had to place thin lines on both sides of the character to ensure everything was closed up, and it became particularly annoying at times, but after that it was much easier to speed through the lining process. When lining animation, it's most common to have a thick outline and a thinner inner line. My outline is 10 pixels while my inner line is half of that at 5 pixels. As I draw more and more, I've been noticing my lines have been getting smoother and sharper, when previously they were shaky and unsteady, and I would always have to use smoothing in Photoshop. The feeling of noticing you're not using smoothing but the lines still look smooth is the best. I don't really have any tips for making your lines smoother other than to draw more. I really think professional animators have such clean sketches and smooth lines because they draw so much. They draw so much that art becomes easy for them to use as a tool to create stories. I've recently changed my mindset on art and see it more as a tool to do what I want rather than a challenge to overcome or something to perfect. However, I still often have moments where I'm too focused on perfection. I have this comic I've been trying to complete for around 2 years now, and it's 50 pages long. I have all 50 pages thumbnailed on paper, but I've yet to digitally transfer them. My oldest YouTube videos showcase the comic in its most early stages of development. Perfectionism is what has been keeping me from even trying to start drawing it, but I'm going to start trying now, and I'll see how that goes. Now we are about at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed. I didn't want to make my first polished YouTube video 30 minutes long because I felt that would be a bit too much, so this video will be a two-parter. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Also, to clarify, I'm not one to gatekeep, so there are no rules in art, so don't take me too seriously. This channel doesn't have a schedule yet, so videos will go out when they are done. Hope this video was interesting to you in some way, and remember to support your fellow artists.